Deep in the misty mountains of North Carolina, hidden among the rolling hills and quiet forests, lies a mystery carved in stone, a collection of ancient markings so perplexing that for centuries they've defied explanation. These are the Judaculla Rocks, one of North America's most enigmatic archaeological sites, covered in intricate petroglyphs that tell a story no one has fully deciphered. Who made them and why? What secrets do they hold about the people who walked this land long before written history began? These questions have puzzled historians, stirred the imaginations of storytellers, and sparked the curiosity of everyone who's ever stood before these weathered stones, feeling the weight of time and mystery pressing in around them. What if I told you that the story of the Judaculla Rocks might reach far beyond this continent across oceans and centuries, to a time of knights, monasteries, and medieval quests for knowledge? It's a connection that seems unlikely at first, almost fantastical, yet as we delve into the clues, a fascinating narrative begins to take shape. This isn't just a tale about ancient symbols, it's about how human curiosity, courage, and the hunger for understanding can bridge seemingly impossible divides. We're about to embark on a journey that will challenge what we think we know about history, exploration, and the threads that connect civilizations separated by vast stretches of time and space. So join me as we step into this realm of wonder and investigation. Together, we'll explore the legends surrounding the Judaculla Rocks, examine the tantalizing hints of medieval influence, and ask whether these carvings might hold keys to a past far more interconnected than we ever imagined. This is more than a history lesson. It's an invitation to see the world through the eyes of those who came before us, to share in their mysteries, and perhaps to help solve a puzzle that has waited generations for its answers. Let's begin. The first documented encounter by European settlers with what would become known as Judaculla Rock occurred not with a grand archaeological fanfare, but almost by accident, as farmers and settlers moved into the remote valleys of Jackson County, North Carolina in the early 1800s. Imagine a farmer clearing land for a new homestead, his plow striking not just soil and root, but the hard, unyielding surface of a massive soapstone boulder. As he wipes away the centuries of accumulated dirt and forest debris, he doesn't find plain stone, but a vast, complex canvas of deeply carved grooves, circles, and figures that stretch across its surface. This was no ordinary rock. The local Cherokee communities, of course, had always known of its sacred significance, speaking of it in hushed tones as the place of Judaculla, a slant-eyed giant who could leap across mountains and whose touch marked the stone. But for the new arrivals, this was a completely baffling and unprecedented discovery. Word of the strange, carved rock spread quickly through the rural communities, becoming a local curiosity and then a subject of wider speculation. It was immediately recognized as something profoundly ancient and extraordinary, a relic from a people and a time that the settlers could not easily place within their own understanding of American history. By the mid-19th century, its fame had grown enough to attract the attention of scholars and journalists. One of the most crucial early records comes from a man named William Stringfield, who in 1879 provided a detailed account and, most importantly, one of the first known sketches of the rock's inscriptions for the Smithsonian Institution. This early sketch is fascinating because it reveals just how complex and dense the petroglyphs were even then, before over a century of weathering and, unfortunately, some damage from vandalism. Stringfield's drawing captured hundreds of elements, cupules, which are those small, carved pits, intertwining lines that seem to map out territories or rivers, and strange, almost humanoid figures. These descriptions and illustrations began to capture the imagination of the world beyond those North Carolina hills, posing a question that was as thrilling as it was unsettling. Who in the ancient Americas possessed the knowledge, the tradition, and the need to create such a permanent and elaborate record? The rock stood as a silent, stubborn challenge to any simple narrative of the continent's past, a mystery waiting in plain sight. To understand the power this place holds, we must first step into the landscape itself. The Judaculla Rock doesn't sit in isolation. It is the heart of a specific, and some would say sacred, geography. The rock is located in the Tuckasegee River Valley of Jackson County, North Carolina, a place cradled by the ancient rolling peaks of the Blue Ridge Mountains. This isn't a landscape that shouts for attention with sheer cliffs and dramatic drops, but rather one that whispers. It's a terrain of deep, shadowed coves, clear, rushing streams, and forests that have stood for centuries. The air itself feels different here, thick with the scent of damp earth and history, a quiet that is both peaceful and profoundly watchful. The Cherokee name for this entire area is Tsulk abbrev Lu circumflex adjective, which translates to the slant-eyed or sloping giant. This wasn't just a random name for a monster, it was a description of the spiritual guardian of the hunt, a supreme, powerful being who presided over the animals and the wilderness. For the Cherokee, this valley was his realm. They believed the giant's 7-league stride left a physical mark on the land, a massive print on the face of the Judaculla Rock itself. But why here? Geologically, the valley is rich in soapstone, a relatively soft rock that is perfect for carving, which undoubtedly made it a practical choice for creating such lasting symbols. Yet practicality alone doesn't explain the profound spiritual significance. This location was far more than just a convenient canvas. It was a central point in a vast, interconnected ritual landscape. The Cherokee used the entire region for hunting, gathering, and ceremonial purposes. The Tuckasegee River provided a vital travel corridor, and the high balds, those treeless mountaintops, were used for vision quests and communication. The rock itself sits near an ancient trail and a historic Cherokee town site, placing it at a crossroads of both physical and spiritual travel. It was a place where the earthly and the supernatural worlds were believed to be thin, a place to leave messages for the spirit of Judaculla, to ask for success in the hunt, or to mark territories and record important events. The landscape, therefore, is not merely a backdrop to the mystery, it is an active character in the story. The isolation of the valley, even today, lends an air of secrecy. The way the mist clings to the hills in the morning seems to hide ancient truths. This specific combination of accessible carving material and deep spiritual belief created the perfect conditions for something extraordinary to be created. The rock is a permanent resident of a transient world, a silent witness to countless generations who understood that some places on this earth simply hold more power than others. To truly grasp the significance of the Judaculla Rocks, we must listen to the stories told by the people for whom this place was never lost, the Cherokee. Their oral tradition doesn't speak of anonymous ancient artists, but of a specific, formidable being, Tsul Kalu, the slant-eyed giant. This name, often anglicized to Judaculla, describes his most distinctive feature, eyes that slanted or were set unevenly in his face, a mark of his otherworldly nature. He was not merely a large man or a mythic brute, he was a unravel adjective, a supernatural being, a lord of the hunt and master of all the animals who called the wilderness home. The legends paint a picture of a creature of immense power and paradoxical character. He could be a benevolent provider or a terrifying force of nature, depending on how he was approached. The mountains and valleys of his domain were his personal hunting grounds, and the Cherokee knew to show him the utmost respect. It was said his voice was the rumble of thunder rolling through the coves, and his stride was so vast that a single step could carry him from one mountain peak to the next. This incredible gait is central to the rock's origin story. One prominent tale describes Tsul Kalu leaping down from his home on the lofty peak of Tuckasegee Valley. As he landed near the Tuckasegee River, his hand touched the great soapstone boulder to steady himself, and his immense weight and power left behind the deep grooves and indentations we see today. In another version, he simply scratched the stone with his fingernails, etching the symbols as a warning or a message to humankind. His role as the master of animals meant the Cherokee hunters had to seek his favor. Before a hunt, they would leave offerings and pray at the rock, asking Tsul Kalu for permission to take game from his forests. The petroglyphs themselves were seen not as random art, but as his territorial marker, a sign that read, "The giant lives here," and a set of rules for those who entered his realm. To disrespect this place or to hunt without permission was to invite calamity. Stories tell of hunters who were led astray by phantom sounds, becoming hopelessly lost in the misty woods for days. Others who showed arrogance might find their arrows inexplicably missing their mark, or worse, they might simply vanish, never to be seen again, taken by the giant they had offended. This deep-seated belief highlights a profound cultural understanding of humanity's place within the natural world. Tsul Kalu was the spiritual embodiment of the wilderness itself, powerful, ancient, and demanding respect. The Cherokee did not see themselves as conquerors of nature, but as participants in a delicate balance overseen by this powerful being. The Judaculla Rock was the physical proof of that covenant, a sacred contract between the people and the spirit of the hunt. It was a place of communication, of ritual, and of memory, ensuring that every generation understood the rules of survival and reverence in a land that was both bountiful and perilous. This rich tapestry of legend provides the first and most vital key to unlocking the mystery of the stones, not as a puzzle to be solved by outsiders, but as a chapter in a living story that has been told for centuries. Yet to truly appreciate the potential connection, we must turn our gaze across the Atlantic to the spiritual and artistic world of medieval Europe. In the centuries following the fall of Rome, European monks and mystics were also deeply engaged in carving symbols, not into soapstone, but into the pages of illuminated manuscripts and the stone of their cathedrals. These were not mere decorations, they were a complex visual language of faith, cosmology, and esoteric knowledge. Intricate knotwork, much like the interlocking lines on the Judaculla Rock, covered the borders of Gospels like the Book of Kells, symbolizing the interconnectedness of all creation and the eternal, unbroken path of divinity. Mystical diagrams such as the Kabbalah's Tree of Life sought to map the universe's spiritual architecture through a series of interconnected nodes and pathways, a conceptual cousin to the sprawling, map-like networks carved in North Carolina. One of the most compelling parallels emerges when we examine the prevalence of cupules, those small, deliberate pits carved into stone. While present at Judaculla, these cup marks are also found in astonishing abundance across Europe, particularly in Britain and Scandinavia. Medieval tradition often referred to them as elf stones or fairy stones, and they were believed to hold protective power to ward off evil spirits or to be conduits for making offerings to the unseen world. The act of carving a cupule was an act of ritual, a physical prayer. This shared motif, a simple, punched depression in rock, suggests a universal human impulse to mark a sacred space, to create a point of contact with the spiritual realm, whether in the forests of Cherokee territory or the highlands of Scotland. This raises a profound and tantalizing question. Are we looking at independent spiritual expressions, or could there be a thread of shared knowledge? The idea of direct trans-oceanic contact before Columbus remains highly controversial and is often dismissed by mainstream academia. Yet, the stylistic and symbolic similarities are difficult to ignore entirely. Could isolated Celtic monks, as some fringe theories suggest, have made the perilous journey across the ocean, bringing with them their symbolic language? Or perhaps these parallels point to something even deeper, a shared archetypal language of the human spirit. Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious proposes that humanity shares a reservoir of universal symbols and patterns, or archetypes, that emerge independently in cultures across the globe. The spiral can represent a journey inward, the labyrinth a path to enlightenment, and the cupule a vessel for the sacred, all arising not from contact but from a common wellspring of human experience and wonder. Whether through unlikely contact or the independent development of profound spiritual ideas, the comparison opens a door to a more interconnected view of human history. It challenges the notion that the ancient Americas were entirely isolated and suggests that the human desire to understand and map the sacred, to leave a permanent mark asking the big questions, is a universal drive. The Cherokee monk, in his own way, seeking vision on a mountain bald, and the European monk, illuminating a manuscript by candlelight, were engaged in the same essential quest to decipher the mysteries of existence and carve their understanding into something that would outlast them. Standing before the Judaculla Rock today, the first thing that strikes you is the sheer density of it. The surface is not just marked with a few carvings. It is a sprawling, chaotic tapestry of hundreds of grooves and figures, all overlapping and intersecting in a way that feels both intentional and wonderfully mysterious. It's like looking at a page from a book written in a language we've only just begun to decipher. Let's take a closer look at some of the most compelling characters in this stone-bound story. Among the most prominent and fascinating symbols are the concentric circles. These aren't just simple rings, they are often intricate, with multiple rings nested inside one another, sometimes with a central cupule or pit at their very heart. To the modern eye, they might resemble a target, but their meaning is believed to be far more profound. In many ancient cultures, concentric circles represent a portal or a doorway between worlds, the physical world we inhabit and the spirit realm beyond. They can symbolize the cosmos, with each ring representing a different layer of existence, or perhaps a journey inward towards spiritual enlightenment. Their frequent presence on the rock suggests that this was a place deeply concerned with communication with the other side, a sacred spot where the veil was considered thin. Then there are the humanoid figures, often described as stick figures, though that term doesn't quite capture their strangeness. These aren't simple drawings of people. Many of them feature distinctive, radiating lines emanating from their heads or bodies, and perhaps most intriguingly, some are depicted with horns or antlers. This immediately calls to mind the Cherokee stories of Judaculla himself, the slant-eyed giant, a being who was both man and spirit, master of the animals. These figures could represent the giant, his spiritual attendants, or hunters adorned for a ritual dance, seeking the blessing of the hunt. Their arrangement across the stone doesn't feel random. It feels like a frozen ritual, a snapshot of a ceremony paused in time. Scattered across this rocky canvas, you'll also find a menagerie of animal tracks. The clearest and most commonly identified are the turkey tracks, with their distinctive three-toed pattern etched deeply into the soapstone. But there are others too, the possibility of deer hooves and bear paws. In a society where survival was intimately tied to the successful hunt, these tracks were more than just pictures, they were a sacred record. They could denote a prayer for abundance, a map of prime hunting territory, or an offering of thanks to the spirit of the animal itself. Each track is a testament to a relationship of respect and dependence between the people and the natural world they revered. Finally, weaving throughout all these specific symbols is a complex web of abstract patterns, meandering lines that curve and cross, creating lattices and networks that cover large sections of the rock. Some researchers have proposed these could represent a literal map, the flow of nearby rivers like the Tuckasegee, the surrounding mountain ranges, or known trails and pathways between villages. Others see a more symbolic meaning, a map of the spirit world, a chart of celestial movements, or a physical manifestation of the interconnectedness of all life, much like the knotwork in medieval illuminated manuscripts. This intricate web ties all the other symbols together, suggesting that every element, every circle, every figure, every track is part of a single grand narrative, a story of people, place, and spirit that we are only beginning to hear. Determining the age of the Judaculla carvings is one of the most challenging aspects of this mystery, as the rock itself cannot be carbon dated like a piece of charcoal or bone. Unlike artifacts buried in a sealed layer of earth, this exposed soapstone canvas has been subjected to centuries of rain, wind, and human interaction, leaving archaeologists to become detectives, piecing together clues from the stone's surface and the stories it whispers to those who know how to look. The methods used are a fascinating blend of forensic science and careful observation, each providing a piece of the puzzle. One of the primary techniques involves analyzing the degree of weathering and patination on the rock. When a fresh groove is carved into soapstone, it exposes a lighter, unweathered surface. Over time, that exposed surface begins to darken again as it reacts with the elements, developing a coating or patina that matches the surrounding rock. By examining the relative darkness and depth of these grooves, researchers can sometimes determine a relative sequence. The lighter, less weathered marks are likely more recent than the darker, more fully integrated ones. Applying this to Judaculla Rock reveals a staggering range. The deepest, most heavily patinated lines suggest immense antiquity, while other, sharper marks could indicate later additions, perhaps even made within the last few centuries. The style of the carvings and the potential tools used offer another layer of evidence. The oldest, deepest grooves lack the precise, V-shaped cross-section that a metal tool would produce. Instead, they are more rounded and U-shaped, consistent with being pecked and ground into the stone using a harder rock like quartz or chert. This lithic technology points to a pre-colonial and likely pre-contact origin for the core of the work. The sheer effort required for this method speaks to a project of great cultural importance, something that would have demanded significant time and communal effort. The possibility of later, finer lines being made with introduced metal tools opens the door to a timeline that extends across millennia, with different generations adding to the sacred narrative. Context is perhaps the most compelling clue. The site is surrounded by evidence of ancient habitation. Archaeologists have found projectile points and pottery shards in the immediate area that date from the late Archaic period around 3,000 years ago through the Woodland period and right up to the time of Cherokee settlement. This continuous occupation suggests the site held enduring significance. The most widely accepted theory among scholars is that the majority of the petroglyphs were created over a long period, perhaps beginning as early as 3,000 to 5,000 years ago by the ancestors of the Cherokee people, with new symbols added during important cultural moments across generations. This is where the medieval theory inserts a fascinating, though highly speculative, possibility. Could some of the more intricate, web-like patterns or specific geometric symbols date from a much later period? Proponents of transoceanic contact theories point to the stylistic similarities with Celtic and Norse art from the medieval period as potential evidence of outside influence. They ask if it's possible that a small group of Norse explorers from a failed Greenland settlement, or even a band of Irish monks seeking solitude, might have journeyed south and interacted with the local population, leaving their own mark on this communal stone. While mainstream archaeology remains deeply skeptical due to a lack of direct physical evidence, the notion captures the imagination, suggesting that the Judaculla Rock might not just be a record of one people's history, but a rare and enigmatic palimpsest of human stories spanning an almost unimaginable breadth of time. One of the most captivating theories proposed by modern researchers is that the sprawling network of lines and symbols on the Judaculla Rock is not a map of the earthly realm, but of the heavens above. Could this soapstone canvas be an ancient observatory, a permanent record of star patterns, planetary movements, or significant celestial events? The idea gains traction when we notice specific clusters of cupules that bear a striking resemblance to known constellations. Some researchers have pointed to a particular grouping that mirrors the 7 stars of the Pleiades cluster, a star group deeply significant in numerous ancient cultures, including those of the Americas, for marking the changing seasons and agricultural cycles. Other patterns seem to echo the distinctive belt of Orion or the sweeping tail of the Big Dipper. These weren't just pretty lights to ancient peoples, they were the original clock, calendar, and compass, all rolled into one, and carving their positions into stone would have been a way to freeze the sky's eternal dance for future generations. This practice of encoding astronomical knowledge into stone or art finds a powerful parallel in the medieval world. During the same centuries when the Cherokee culture was flourishing in North America, scholars in European monasteries were meticulously copying and creating astronomical charts. These weren't simple star maps, they were complex diagrams that blended the science of the classical world with Christian cosmology, illustrating the perceived harmony between the heavens and the divine plan. The volvels in medieval manuscripts, rotating paper wheels used to calculate the movement of planets, and the dates of Easter represent a similar impulse, the desire to bring the immense, abstract cycles of the cosmos down to a human scale to make them tangible and understandable. The Judaculla petroglyphs, with their interlocking circles and pathways, could be seen as a Stone Age volvel, a fixed mechanism for tracking time and celestial order. The most compelling argument for an astronomical function lies in potential alignments with solar events. The rock's specific placement in the landscape may not be accidental. Some investigators have charted the lines of sight from the rock to the surrounding horizon, speculating that certain key grooves could align with the rising or setting sun during the solstices or equinoxes. A groove that perfectly frames the sunrise on the longest day of the year would transform the rock from a passive record into an active instrument, a solar marker that heralded the turning of the seasons. This would have been knowledge of immense practical and spiritual importance, signaling the optimal times for planting, harvesting, hunting migrations, and holding ceremonies to ensure the community's continued harmony with the natural world. Whether the carvings represent a specific star chart, a solar calendar, or a more abstract cosmic map, the underlying concept speaks to a universal human endeavor. From the Cherokee carvers in the Smoky Mountains to the monk astronomers in their scriptoria, separated by an ocean and entirely different worldviews, we see the same profound need to understand our place in the universe. They each looked up at the same night sky, filled with the same awe and curiosity, and sought to capture its mysteries in the most permanent way they knew how. The Judaculla Rock, in this light, becomes more than a relic. It is a testament to humanity's eternal quest to read the heavens and find our meaning written in the stars. Another profound layer to this mystery invites us to look not upward at the stars, but inward into the human mind itself. What if the intricate web of lines and symbols was never intended to map the outer world, but to chart the incredible, non-physical terrain of visionary experience? This compelling hypothesis suggests the Judaculla Rock may be a powerful artifact of shamanic ritual, a permanent record of journeys taken into the spirit world during altered states of consciousness. Across countless indigenous cultures, including the Cherokee, spiritual leaders known as shamans served as bridges between the physical and spiritual realms. They entered profound trance states through rhythmic drumming, dancing, fasting, or the use of sacred plants, embarking on what are often described as spirit journeys. In these visions, the shaman might travel to the upper or lower worlds to retrieve knowledge, seek healing for the community, or communicate with powerful entities like Judaculla himself. Many researchers argue that the imagery commonly reported in these visions, vivid geometric patterns, swirling vortices, luminous grids, and encounters with hybrid human-animal beings, bears a stunning resemblance to the petroglyphs. The concentric circles could represent portals or vortexes through which the shaman passed. The radiating, horned figures might be depictions of the powerful spirit guides or guardians met along the way. The meandering lines could trace the actual path of the journey itself, a cartography of an interior voyage. This concept of seeking divine knowledge through altered states finds a powerful and unexpected parallel in medieval European Christian mysticism. While separated by an ocean and vastly different theologies, the pursuit was remarkably similar. Medieval mystics like Hildegard of Bingen and Julian of Norwich sought direct communion with God not solely through prayer, but through intense contemplative practices, fasting, and sleepless vigils that could induce ecstatic trances. Hildegard, for instance, experienced powerful visions from a young age, which she described as being shown the shadow of the living light. She then worked with scribes to translate these ineffable experiences into detailed and often bizarre illustrations for her theological works, civias. Her visions were filled with mandala-like circles, streaming rays of light, and intricate architectural forms, a symbolic language not so different from the petroglyphs used to make the unseen seen. In both traditions, we see a shared human imperative, the need to translate a profoundly personal and transcendent experience into a shared cultural language using the most potent symbols available. For the Cherokee, that canvas was the sacred soapstone in the heart of Judaculla's domain. For the medieval mystic, it was vellum or the stained glass of a cathedral window. The Judaculla Rock, in this light, becomes less a puzzle to be solved and more a window into a universal human experience. It suggests that the deepest mysteries these carvings hold are not about who passed through this valley, but what they saw when they closed their eyes and journeyed into the vast wilderness of the spirit. Perhaps the most grounded and practical interpretation of the Judaculla Rock lies not in the stars or the spirit world, but in the fundamental need for survival. For a people deeply connected to the land, the carvings may have served a vital, everyday purpose, mapping the hunt and marking territory. This theory suggests the rock was a communal ledger and a territorial boundary stone, a practical tool etched into the landscape itself. The prevalence of clear, unmistakable animal track carvings, particularly the three-toed pattern of the wild turkey, a primary food source, lends strong support to this idea. A successful hunt was cause for celebration and gratitude, but also for record-keeping. By carving the track of a harvested animal, a hunter might not be boasting, but offering a prayer of thanks to Judaculla, the master of game, ensuring future success and acknowledging the sacred exchange of life for life. Over generations, the accumulation of these symbols could have represented a history of the community's relationship with the animals that sustained them. This notion of using the landscape to mark territory finds a fascinating, if culturally distinct, parallel in medieval Europe. While Cherokee hunters were carving tracks into soapstone, European nobility were establishing vast forest preserves for their exclusive use. These royal hunting grounds were not simply wild forests, they were carefully managed territories, and their boundaries were often marked with elaborate stone cairns, carved posts, or specially blazed trees. The famous forest laws of Norman England, for instance, were brutally enforced to protect these boundaries with severe punishments for poaching. The physical markers served a clear legal and social function. This land is under the authority of the king, a declaration of power and exclusivity. The Judaculla Rock, in this light, could be seen as a similar, though spiritually infused, declaration. This valley is under the guardianship of Tsul Kalu. Hunt here only with his permission. Beyond simple boundary marking, the complex web of lines covering the rock might represent something far more intricate, a sophisticated topographical map. Some researchers have proposed that the meandering grooves correspond almost exactly to the local river systems, the Tuckasegee and its tributaries, which would have been the primary highways and lifelines for the people living here. Other lines could chart the ridgelines of the surrounding mountains, like Tennessee Bald and Caney Fork, which were not just geographical features but sacred places in Cherokee cosmology. Identifying caves, mineral springs, or particular stands of nut-bearing trees on this stone map would have conveyed invaluable practical knowledge across generations, a permanent, shared database of the most important resources within the giant's domain. The rock's location itself supports this communal function. It sits near an ancient trail and a known Cherokee town site, placing it at a natural crossroads, a place where people would have gathered. It could have served as a teaching stone for young hunters, where elders pointed out the carved turkey tracks and bear paws, explaining the behaviors of these animals and the sacred protocols for the hunt. It might have been a place to plan seasonal migrations, to decide which cove to hunt in the fall based on the patterns carved by their ancestors. In this view, the Judaculla Rock transforms from a mysterious artifact into a brilliant, multi-generational tool, part map, part legal document, part spiritual guide, and part historical archive, all fused together into a single, enduring soapstone canvas that ensured the community's survival and continuity in a powerful, demanding land. Just a short distance from the Judaculla Rock, almost hidden by ferns and moss, a natural spring bubbles up from the earth, its clear, cold water flowing steadily toward the nearby creek. This proximity is unlikely to be a coincidence. In countless ancient cultures, a fresh water source was far more than a practical necessity. It was a sacred gift, a place where the boundary between the earthly and the spiritual worlds was believed to be exceptionally thin. For the Cherokee, water was life and purification. Springs were known as atawahi, places of sacred medicine, where prayers were offered and ceremonial cleansing was performed before important rituals or after conflict. The presence of this life-giving water right beside the carved stone suggests the entire site was a holistic sanctuary, a place where the act of carving was intrinsically linked to the spiritual power emanating from the spring. This deep reverence for sacred water sources creates a powerful bridge across the Atlantic to the spiritual practices of medieval Europe. Across the continent, from the rolling hills of Ireland to the forests of Germany, natural springs were also venerated as points of access to the divine, often later Christianized as holy wells. These were places of pilgrimage where people would journey for miles to drink the water, bathe in it, or leave offerings of cloth or coins, seeking healing, forgiveness, or a connection to something greater than themselves. The water itself was seen as a conduit for grace, a liquid prayer. This parallel practice of seeking spiritual transformation at the point where pure water emerges from the dark earth suggests a shared human instinct to find the sacred in the fundamental elements that sustain life. Could the carvings on the rock be directly related to this aquatic spiritualism? Some researchers propose that the intricate, web-like patterns of lines are not maps of the land, but representations of the underground waterways themselves, a symbolic chart of the hidden veins of the earth that culminate in this sacred spring. The concentric circles, so often interpreted as celestial portals, could equally represent the surface of the water, a liminal plane through which prayers and offerings passed into the spirit world. It is not difficult to envision a ritual where a supplicant would first purify themselves in the spring's waters, then approach the rock to add a new carving, a cupule as an offering pit, an animal track as a prayer for a successful hunt, or a line to connect their own story to the eternal flow of water and spirit. This connection might even extend to the realm of deities. In Cherokee tradition, while Judaculla was the lord of the hunt, other beings were associated with water. The Octina, a powerful serpentine monster, was said to dwell in deep river pools, and its presence demanded respect. In medieval Europe, many holy wells were originally dedicated to pre-Christian goddesses or local spirits of place before being rededicated to saints like Bridget or Anne. The Judaculla Rock, standing sentinel beside its spring, could therefore be a focal point for communicating with a whole pantheon of spiritual forces that governed the water, the land, and the creatures that moved between them. The site becomes a comprehensive spiritual dashboard where every natural element, stone, water, and the forest beyond, was interwoven into a single, powerful tapestry of belief and practice. Just a few hundred feet from the main Judaculla Rock, nestled in the same quiet field, stands another silent sentinel of stone that deepens the mystery of this entire site. This is the Judaculla stick, a tall, narrow-standing stone that rises from the earth like a weathered finger pointing toward the sky. Unlike the sprawling, carved canvas of its famous neighbor, the stick is austere and unmarked, yet its presence is no less significant. Its deliberate placement in such close proximity to the petroglyph boulder suggests it was part of a greater whole, a second component in a sophisticated ritual and astronomical complex whose full purpose we are only beginning to grasp. The most compelling feature of the Judaculla stick is its precise alignment not only with the main rock but with the surrounding landscape and heavens above. Researchers who have surveyed the site note that the stone is strategically positioned to cast specific shadows across the face of the Judaculla Rock at key moments of the year. Imagine the summer solstice sunrise. As the sun crests the specific notch of a distant mountain ridge, the long, thin shadow of the stick might slowly travel across the carved symbols, perhaps highlighting a particular concentric circle or a set of animal tracks, effectively turning the entire site into a gigantic, stone-calibrated solar clock. This would have provided an incredibly accurate, immutable way to mark the solstices and equinoxes, dates of paramount importance for agricultural planning, seasonal ceremonies, and maintaining the sacred calendar. This practice of using standing stones as astronomical markers finds a stunning parallel in the medieval monuments of Europe, particularly in regions like Brittany in France and various sites across the British Isles. While often associated with much older Neolithic peoples like the Druids, many of these monoliths remained in use and held deep significance throughout the medieval period. Local Christian communities sometimes Christianized them, carving crosses into their surfaces, but they never forgot their original function. The most famous example, Stonehenge, is an extreme case, but smaller, localized standing stones acted as focal points for village timekeeping and seasonal rituals. A medieval farmer in Wales might have used the shadow of a particular monolith falling on a certain hillock to know it was time to bring the sheep down from the high pastures for winter. The Judaculla stick could have served an identical, vital, practical and ceremonial purpose for the Cherokee and their ancestors, anchoring their community to the cycles of the sun. Beyond its possible function as a calendar, the stick's simple, upright form suggests a powerful ritualistic role. In many ancient cultures, a standing stone represented an axis mundi, a connection point between the earth, the heavens, and the underworld. It was a physical conduit for prayer and communication with the spirit world. In the context of the Judaculla legends, the stick could have been seen as a literal representation of the giant himself, a frozen embodiment of his power and presence. It might have been a place to leave offerings directly for Tsul Kalu, or a station where a shaman would stand during a ceremony to better channel the spiritual energy of the site. Its unadorned nature is not a sign of irrelevance, but perhaps the opposite. Its power was inherent in its form and placement, needing no additional carving. The combination of the carved rock and the aligned standing stone paints a picture of a far more complex site than either feature alone would suggest. Together, they form a primitive but brilliantly effective observatory and temple. The rock provided the permanent, symbolic record, the map of the spirit world, the record of the hunt, the chart of the stars. The stick provided the dynamic, interactive element, the moving shadow that activated the symbols with the sun's light, the gnomon that made the celestial cycles visible and measurable on Earth. This holistic view transforms our understanding from a single mysterious rock to an entire sacred precinct designed for communion with the forces of nature, a place where time, spirit, and survival were inextricably linked through the silent language of stone and shadow. For the European settlers pushing into the Appalachian frontier, the Judaculla Rock was an unsettling and inexplicable anomaly. These were people carving a new life out of what they often viewed as a vast, untamed wilderness, and their world view was steeped in a blend of devout Christianity and old-world superstitions. Confronted with this sprawling canvas of strange symbols, they had no framework of Cherokee legend to explain it. Their interpretations, therefore, were filtered through a lens of fear, religious suspicion, and a deep-seated need to make sense of the unknown using the only cultural references they had. The most common and immediate conclusion many drew was that they were staring at evidence of devil worship. The intricate, swirling patterns and enigmatic figures didn't align with any Christian iconography they recognized. In the absence of a familiar sacred narrative, the carving seemed sinister, the work of a malevolent force. They began to call it Devil's Writing or the Judaculla Rock, with the name itself an anglicized version of Tsul Kalu, taking on a diabolical connotation for them. This fear was amplified by the site's isolated, mist-shrouded location, which felt inherently pagan and uncanny to settlers accustomed to cleared farmland and church steeples. The idea that native peoples could create such complex and enduring spiritual art was often beyond their consideration. It was far easier to attribute it to a supernatural evil they already believed in. This impulse to label unfamiliar sacred sites as diabolical is a direct echo of medieval European practices. Centuries earlier, as Christianity spread across Europe, missionaries frequently encountered ancient pagan shrines at sacred groves, springs, and standing stones. To facilitate conversion and demonize the old religions, the church systematically repurposed these sites, often building churches directly on top of them or reinterpreting the local deities as demons or evil spirits. A sacred spring dedicated to a Celtic goddess might be rebranded as a place where Satan lured the unwary. The settlers in North Carolina were, perhaps unconsciously, repeating this exact same cultural process. They were medievalizing the American landscape, applying an old-world folklore filter to something entirely new, because it was the only way their worldview could process it. Another theory that captured the settler imagination was the idea of a lost civilization. Unable to reconcile the sophistication of the carvings with their perceptions of the local Cherokee people, some began to spin tales of a mysterious, advanced race that had long since vanished from the earth. This echoed a popular 19th-century notion that the continent's great earthworks and mounds, like those found in the Ohio Valley, were too complex to have been built by Native Americans and must be the work of a lost group, often fancifully termed the Mound Builders. For Judaculla Rock, the theory suggested that Phoenicians, Vikings, or even one of the lost tribes of Israel had traversed the ocean, ventured into these mountains, and left their mark before mysteriously disappearing. This theory, while equally incorrect, was born from a different place than fear, a place of awe and romanticism, a desire to connect this new world to the ancient histories of the old world. These colonial interpretations, whether born of fear or fascination, reveal more about the settlers themselves than they do about the rock. They highlight a profound cultural disconnect and a failure to engage with the living knowledge of the Cherokee people who still inhabited the land. The settlers' theories were projections, attempts to impose a familiar, often European-centered narrative onto a deeply indigenous story. In doing so, they created a new layer of folklore around the Judaculla Rock, one that obscured its true meaning for generations but also testament to the powerful, unsettling effect this sacred stone has always had on all who encounter it. For the eastern band of Cherokee Indians today, Judaculla Rock is far more than an archaeological site. It is a living, breathing sanctuary, a direct link to their ancestors and the powerful spirit of Tsul Kalu. The modern Cherokee relationship with the rock is one of profound reverence and active stewardship, embodying a cultural continuity that has weathered centuries of change. Tribal members still visit this sacred place for prayer, meditation, and to conduct quiet ceremonies, often leaving small, traditional offerings of tobacco or cornmeal as a sign of respect and to maintain the relationship with the spirit world. These acts are not recreations or performances for tourists. They are a genuine continuation of ancient practices, a way to honor the giants of the past and ensure the cultural heartbeat of the Cherokee people remains strong for generations to come. This enduring reverence comes with a solemn responsibility. the urgent and ongoing duty to protect Judaculla Rock from the twin threats of modern vandalism and natural erosion. The soft soapstone that made it an ideal canvas for ancient artists also makes it tragically vulnerable to contemporary damage. Over the decades, the rock has suffered from graffiti, with people carving their initials and dates into its surface, heedlessly scarring a sacred text they cannot read. Even the well-intentioned curiosity of visitors touching the grooves, walking on the stone, or using chemicals to make casts steadily wears away at the delicate patina and precise edges of the ancient carvings. Each act of disrespect, whether malicious or ignorant, is felt deeply by the Cherokee community as a violation not just of a rock, but of their church, their history, and their very identity. In response, the Eastern Band has become a powerful and proactive guardian of their heritage. They have worked closely with Jackson County and the state of North Carolina to install protective measures, including a sturdy shelter that shields the rock from the worst of the rain and sun, and a viewing platform that allows visitors to see the carvings without walking on them. Perhaps more importantly, they have taken control of the narrative through education. Tribal historians and cultural experts are actively involved in interpreting the site for the public, ensuring that the stories told are not colonial fantasies about lost tribes or devil worship, but the authentic Cherokee legends of Tsul Kalu. This shift in storytelling is a crucial act of reclamation, returning the voice and the meaning of the rock to the people who have always understood it. The preservation efforts extend beyond physical barriers into the realm of digital and spiritual safeguarding. The tribe has supported detailed 3D laser scanning projects that have created a high-resolution, permanent digital record of every groove and cupule. This invaluable archive ensures that even if the physical stone were to further degrade, the precise details of the carvings will be preserved for future study and cultural memory. Yet, for all this advanced technology, the most potent protection often comes from the simplest act, renewed respect. The Cherokee community encourages everyone who visits to approach the rock not as a tourist attraction, but as a place of worship, to observe quietly, to reflect on the deep history, and to leave only with photographs and a greater understanding. This cultural revival is not about looking backward with nostalgia. It is about carrying a living tradition forward, ensuring that the slant-eyed giant's domain remains a place of power, prayer, and perpetual respect. Just a short walk from the carved surface of Judaculla Rock, nestled into the earth itself, lies one of the most captivating pieces of the entire mystery, a massive, unmistakable depression in the stone that stretches over 7 feet in length. To stand before it is to feel a genuine shiver of wonder, for its shape is undeniably that of a human foot, but on a scale that defies ordinary human existence. This is the legendary footprint of Tsul Kalu himself, the slant-eyed giant, a physical mark on the landscape that the Cherokee point to as undeniable proof of his reality and power. According to the stories passed down through generations, this impression was left when the giant leaped down from his mountain home, his tremendous weight and supernatural strength leaving a permanent scar in the very bedrock as he landed in the valley he ruled. The sheer scale of this feature immediately brings to mind the universal and enduring theme of giants that permeates folklore across the globe. In the Cherokee worldview, Tsul Kalu was not a mindless monster but a complex spiritual guardian. His great size was a manifestation of his immense power over the natural world, a literal and figurative larger-than-life force of nature. This echoes a common thread in many indigenous belief systems, where giants often personify the raw, untamable power of the wilderness, the mountains, the storms, the ancient forests themselves. They are not merely big people, they are the embodiment of the land's spirit, inspiring both awe and a necessary respect in those who live within their domain. This fascination with giants is not unique to the Americas. It forms a deep and persistent vein in medieval European folklore as well. Across the British Isles, countless hills and peculiar rock formations were explained away as the work of giants. The Wrekin in Shropshire was said to be a spadeful of earth dropped by a giant, while the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland was legendarily built as a stepping stone path to Scotland. These stories served a similar purpose. They provided an explanation for the unexplainable in the natural world before the advent of modern geology, transforming strange landscapes into the playgrounds of colossal beings. Both traditions, though an ocean apart, used the giant as a narrative tool to make sense of a mysterious and often intimidating world. The concept of a giant's footprint as sacred evidence is particularly powerful. It acts as a tangible anchor for the legend, a place where myth literally touches the earth. For the Cherokee, this wasn't just a story, it was history written in stone. It served as a permanent reminder of the covenant between the people and the spirit of the hunt. To see the print was to know Judaculla was real, his rules were in effect, and the hunt must be conducted with reverence. This grounding of belief in a physical feature strengthened the cultural tradition, making the abstract concept of a spiritual guardian immediate and real for every new generation who came to see the proof for themselves. When we place the Judaculla footprint beside its European counterparts, we see a fascinating convergence of human imagination. It suggests a shared human tendency to externalize our fears and wonders about the natural world into the form of giants. Whether in the misty valleys of North Carolina or the rolling hills of England, ancient people looked upon dramatic, inexplicable landscapes and saw the handiwork of beings as grand as the scenery itself. The giant becomes a cultural bridge, a symbol that transcends geography and speaks to a universal human experience, the need to find meaning, narrative, and a sense of scale in a world that often feels overwhelmingly vast and mysterious. Amidst the swirling mist of theories surrounding Judaculla Rock, one of the most controversial yet strangely compelling ideas suggests that the carvings might not be entirely indigenous in origin. This hypothesis proposes that centuries before Columbus sailed, intrepid monks from the Celtic fringes of medieval Europe might have made the perilous journey across the Atlantic, eventually finding their way into the Appalachian highlands and leaving their mark on this remote stone. The story typically centers on a Welsh prince named Madoc, who, according to legend, sailed away from a war-torn homeland in the 12th century and discovered a distant land across the Western Ocean. Later tales claimed he returned, gathered followers, and vanished back to this new world, his colonists eventually being absorbed into native tribes. Another version points to Irish monks like Saint Brendan the Navigator, whose legendary voyages in small skin-covered boats or curraghs were said to have taken him to a land of promise far to the west. Proponents of this theory argue that these isolated Europeans, steeped in their own tradition of stone carving and possessing a complex symbolic language, could have interacted with the local Cherokee ancestors, perhaps even contributing some of the more intricate, web-like patterns that seem to echo Celtic knotwork. The evidence offered for this extraordinary claim is a fragile tapestry of suggestive threads, each intriguing but ultimately inconclusive. Beyond the stylistic comparisons of the petroglyphs, supporters point to 18th century reports from explorers like George Morgan, who claimed that some Mandan people on the Great Plains used words that sounded Welsh and had legends of a white-skinned ancestor. They also highlight the so-called Bat Creek Stone, an artifact unearthed in Tennessee in the 1880s that appeared to bear a Paleo-Hebrew inscription, though it was later widely dismissed as a probable hoax. The core of the argument often rests on a powerful desire to rewrite history, to find evidence that the vast ocean was not the barrier we once believed, and that the medieval world was far more interconnected than our textbooks allow. It taps into a romantic vision of courageous monks braving the unknown in fragile vessels, driven by a faith so strong it could carry them to a new world. However, the overwhelming consensus among mainstream historians and archaeologists is that this theory is at best a fascinating folktale and at worst a distracting relic of colonialist thinking. The academic pushback is severe and rooted in a stark lack of physical proof. Despite centuries of extensive excavation and study across North America, not a single verified artifact of unambiguous medieval European origin has ever been found in a secure pre-Columbian archaeological context. No pieces of chainmail, no distinctly European tools, no coins dated before 1492. The linguistic evidence, often based on subjective similarities between words, is considered thoroughly debunked by modern linguists. Furthermore, the theory itself can be seen as subtly dismissive of Native American sophistication, implying that complex and intricate art must have an outside European source rather than emerging from the rich and advanced cultural traditions of the indigenous people themselves. It projects a European-centered narrative onto a landscape that already had a complete and profound history of its own. Yet, even if we dismiss the literal idea of Welsh princes or Irish monks at Judaculla Rock, the theory retains a certain metaphorical power. It speaks to our enduring fascination with the idea of lost worlds and forgotten voyages, a testament to the human spirit's relentless curiosity. The parallels drawn between Celtic and Cherokee spiritualism, their shared reverence for nature, their use of intricate symbols, and their practice of seeking visions in isolated places highlight a universal human experience rather than evidence of contact. Both cultures, though separated by an ocean, developed complex ways to express their understanding of the cosmos and humanity's place within it. In this light, the Judaculla Rock ceases to be a potential Rosetta Stone for transoceanic contact and becomes something perhaps even more meaningful, a powerful reminder that the drive to create, to mark our existence, and to seek connection with the divine is a fundamental thread woven through the tapestry of human history, appearing in strikingly similar patterns in the most unexpected, far-flung corners of the globe. The challenge of deciphering the Judaculla petroglyphs has captivated professional archaeologists and epigraphers for well over a century, a pursuit marked by moments of thrilling possibility and long stretches of frustrating dead ends. Early 20th century researchers, armed with little more than notebooks and plaster for making casts, approached the rock with a blend of awe and a confident, if perhaps misplaced, sense of empiricism. They meticulously catalogued every groove and cupule, producing detailed drawings that are now invaluable for comparison, as some fine details have since been lost to erosion. These pioneers often tried to force the symbols into a familiar framework, searching for a direct, one-to-one correspondence with known alphabets or pictorial languages from the Old World. Some speculated they were looking at a form of Ogham script used by ancient Celts, while others saw potential runic influences. This approach, while systematic, was fundamentally limited by a Eurocentric perspective that struggled to accept the carvings as a complete and sophisticated system of communication born entirely from the indigenous cultures of the Appalachians. The mid-20th century saw a significant shift in methodology, moving away from searching for Old World parallels and toward understanding the rock within its local cultural and environmental context. Archaeologists began to collaborate more closely with the eastern band of Cherokee Indians, recognizing that the oral traditions held by the community were not mere legends but a vital historical record. This collaboration led to one of the most enduring and persuasive interpretations, that the Judaculla Rock is a detailed map. In this view, the long, meandering lines are believed to chart the courses of the Tuckasegee River and its key tributaries, while clusters of cupules could represent important village sites and animal tracks signified prime hunting grounds or sacred areas. This theory grounds the rock in the practical and spiritual needs of a people deeply connected to their territory, transforming it from an abstract mystery into a functional guide and a title deed to the land granted by Tsul Kalu himself. The advent of advanced technology in recent decades promised a new era of breakthroughs. High-resolution 3D laser scanning has allowed researchers to create a digital, millimeter-perfect model of the entire rock surface, revealing faint grooves and overlaps that are invisible to the naked eye. This technology enables analysts to determine the sequence of the carvings, identifying which symbols were etched first and which were added later, potentially across generations. The use of reflectance transformation imaging, or RTI, which captures the stone's surface under varying lighting angles, has further enhanced the visibility of the most weathered marks. Yet for all this technological power, a definitive Rosetta Stone remains elusive. The scans provide unparalleled data, but data is not meaning. They offer the how and the when in a relative sense, but they cannot tell us the why. The technology, in a sense, has given us a clearer view of the lock, but not the key. This has led to a number of fascinating, though ultimately unprovable, niche theories. Some researchers have proposed that the rock is a complex astronomical calendar, with specific glyphs aligning with solstice sunrises or the positions of certain stars like the Pleiades cluster. Others, drawing on comparative mythology, see striking parallels between the Judaculla figures and the iconography of shamanic vision quests, suggesting the carvings are a frozen record of spirit journeys and encounters with otherworldly beings. Each theory is a lens that brings certain elements into sharp focus while leaving others blurry. The astronomical theory might explain the concentric circles but not the animal tracks. The shamanic vision theory gives meaning to the humanoid figures but less to the sprawling, map-like networks. This is the core of the academic stalemate. The rock refuses to be reduced to a single function. It stubbornly suggests it was all of these things at once: a map, a calendar, a spiritual narrative, and a territorial marker, a multi-layered document whose full meaning we may only ever understand in fragments. The greatest breakthrough may have been the realization that the search for one definitive answer is itself a dead end, and that the true message of Judaculla Rock is the profound complexity of the people who created it. But to truly understand the choice of this particular canvas, we need to look closer at the very substance of the rock itself. The Judaculla Rock is not granite or sandstone, it is soapstone, a material known to geologists as steatite. This was a deliberate and brilliant selection, not an accidental one. Soapstone possesses a unique set of properties that made it the perfect medium for a message intended to last millennia. Its most defining characteristic is its talc content, which gives it a surprisingly soft, almost greasy feel, hence the name soapstone. This softness meant that ancient artists, armed with nothing more than a harder piece of stone like quartz or chert, could patiently peck and grind their symbols into the surface with a degree of control and relative ease that would have been impossible on a harder rock. Creating the vast, intricate network of lines we see today would still have been a monumental task, demanding immense patience and skill, but the choice of soapstone made it a feasible one. It transformed the artist's vision from a fleeting idea into a permanent record. This practicality was matched by the material's incredible durability. While soft to carve, soapstone is remarkably resistant to the elements that destroy other rocks. It is non-porous and largely impervious to water, meaning it doesn't absorb moisture that can freeze, expand, and crack it apart from within during cold winters. It also withstands chemical weathering from acid rain far better than marble or limestone. This combination of being easy to work with yet hard to wear away is the holy grail for any civilization looking to leave a permanent mark. The ancestors of the Cherokee weren't just creating art for the present. They were investing in a legacy, encoding their stories, maps, and prayers into a material they trusted to carry their voice across countless generations. The very existence of the petroglyphs today, thousands of years later, is a testament to their profound understanding of their own environment and the materials within it. This savvy selection of a durable yet workable medium finds a fascinating parallel in the practices of medieval European scribes and stonemasons. While they worked on different scales, their core challenge was identical: how to make a permanent mark. In the scriptoria of monasteries across Europe, monks didn't write on simple paper. They dedicated years of their lives to copying sacred texts onto vellum, a specially prepared calfskin that was incredibly durable, resistant to tearing, and could last for centuries if cared for properly. The choice of vellum, much like the choice of soapstone, was a conscious investment in permanence, ensuring that the Word of God and accumulated knowledge would survive the ravages of time. For inscriptions meant to withstand outdoor weather, medieval craftsmen often turned to slate, a fine-grained rock that could be split into flat, smooth sheets and carved with precise lettering for tombstones and commemorative plaques. Others used lead, a soft, malleable metal that could be pressed or hammered into letters for less formal but still enduring records. The comparison highlights a universal human impulse that transcends culture and continent. Whether it was a Native American carver in the Smoky Mountains selecting a soapstone boulder or a medieval monk in France preparing a sheet of vellum, both were making a deliberate choice based on a deep, practical knowledge of their available materials. They were both seeking that perfect balance between the ease of creation and the promise of longevity. They understood that the value of the message was inextricably linked to the endurance of the medium. For the people at Judaculla, the soapstone was more than just a convenient rock. It was a sacred repository, a living library of stone chosen specifically because it could hold the spirit of their stories and the weight of their history against the endless press of time. To understand the Judaculla Rock's place in the broader story of ancient North America, we must widen our view and visit other sites where our ancestors left their marks upon the land. One of the most famous and directly comparable is Newspaper Rock State Historic Monument in the Red Rock Desert of Utah. Here, a massive, dark, vertical sandstone cliff face is absolutely dense with hundreds of petroglyphs, a swirling cacophony of images carved by the ancestral Pueblones, Fremont, and Navajo peoples over nearly 2,000 years. At first glance, the two sites share an overwhelming visual similarity, a chaotic overlay of symbols from different eras, a palimpsest of human expression. Both feature a menagerie of animal tracks from bighorn sheep to turkeys, and humanoid figures with distinctive headdresses or radiating lines. This suggests a shared, continent-wide vocabulary where a spiral might universally represent a journey or a set of animal tracks signified a successful hunt, regardless of the specific culture. Yet the differences are just as telling. The Judaculla carvings are almost entirely pecked into a flat, horizontal surface, while the images on newspaper rock are often scratched or abraded into a vertical wall. The Utah site also boasts clearer depictions of hunters on horseback, a technology introduced by the Spanish, which helps anchor its more recent additions to a specific historical period, a clarity that continues to elude researchers at the older Judaculla site. Venturing north into the Canadian Shield, the Peterborough petroglyphs in Ontario present another fascinating point of comparison. Carved into a vast expanse of white crystalline limestone, these images are attributed to the Algonquian-speaking peoples and are believed to be around 1,000 years old. Here we find a powerful shared symbol that resonates deeply with the Judaculla legend, the pervasive image of the Mishipshu, the great lynx or underwater panther. This powerful, serpentine supernatural being, often depicted with horns, spines, and a long, winding tail, is the master of water and all the creatures within it. The parallels to the Cherokee's Tsul Kalu, the slant-eyed giant and master of the land animals, are striking. Both are powerful, otherworldly guardians of their respective domains, beings who must be appeased and respected. The humanoid figures at Peterborough also frequently feature radiating lines from their heads, much like the figures in North Carolina, which many interpret as symbols of shamanic power or spiritual energy experienced during vision quests. This strengthens the theory that a significant portion of the Judaculla carvings are not mundane records but sacred art, born from profound altered states of consciousness and communication with the spirit world. Further south, in the canyons of the American Southwest, sites like the Petroglyph National Monument outside Albuquerque, New Mexico, offer a slightly different perspective. Here, the Rio Grande Valley served as a major migration and trade corridor for countless generations, and the petroglyphs left on the volcanic basalt boulders reflect that movement. We see familiar motifs, spirals, zigzag patterns, and countless animal forms, but the Southwest also provides some of the clearest examples of what archaeologists call ceremonialism in rock art. Specific, complex figures, often resembling masked dancers known as cachinas, are directly linked to ongoing Pueblo religious practices. This provides a living context that is more challenging to apply to Judaculla, as the Cherokee presence there, while long-standing, is part of a more recent layer of a much deeper history. The Kachina figures show a direct continuity between ancient rock art and modern ceremony, a thread that, while undoubtedly present for the Cherokee at Judaculla, was tragically frayed by colonial displacement and the passage of millennia. What emerges from this continental tour is a profound sense of both unity and diversity. From the deserts of Utah to the forests of North Carolina to the Canadian Shield, ancient peoples felt the same fundamental need to make a permanent mark to say, "We were here." This is what we saw, what we believed, what we feared, and what we revered. They shared a common symbolic language for the most essential aspects of life: the hunt, the spirit, the cosmos, and the powerful beings that govern them all. Yet each site remains utterly unique, a product of its specific environment, its available materials, and the distinct cultural lens of its creators. The Judaculla Rock is not an outlier or an anomaly. It is a vital and brilliant chapter in a vast, continent-wide story written in stone. Its mystery is not one of isolation, but of participation in a silent, sprawling conversation that stretched across thousands of miles and thousands of years, a conversation we are still today only just learning how to hear. For centuries, researchers studying the Judaculla Rock were limited to what they could observe with the naked eye, tracing fading lines with chalk or making plaster casts that risked damaging the soft soapstone. The true complexity of the carvings remained shrouded, their deepest secrets locked in stone and shadow. Then, the digital age arrived, bringing with it tools that would revolutionize the study of this ancient site, not by replacing traditional knowledge, but by revealing a hidden layer of detail previously invisible to even the most trained observer. The key breakthrough came with the application of high-resolution, three-dimensional laser scanning. This technology works by projecting a precise laser beam across the rock surface millions of times, measuring the exact distance each time the light reflects back to the scanner. The result is a point cloud, a digital tapestry of countless individual measurements that a computer then stitches together into a perfect, millimeter-accurate, three-dimensional model of the entire rock face. This process has gifted researchers with an unprecedented view. The digital model can be manipulated on a screen, rotated, and, most importantly, illuminated from any angle. By virtually raking light across the surface from extreme, low angles, grooves that appear as mere scratches under natural sunlight are thrown into sharp, dramatic relief, revealing their true depth and curvature. This technique has uncovered a startling density of previously unnoticed symbols hiding in plain sight. Faint, shallow cupules that were completely invisible are now clearly documented. Overlapping lines can be separated and analyzed to determine which were carved first, allowing archaeologists to sequence the creation of the petroglyphs for the first time, potentially revealing a narrative of additions made across centuries or even millennia. It's as if a dimly lit manuscript has been placed under a powerful magnifying glass with perfect lighting, allowing every faded pen stroke to be seen with crystal clarity. Beyond revealing new symbols, this technology provides forensic-level analysis of the methods used to create them. The 3D models are so precise that researchers can examine the microscopic contours within each individual groove. The shape of a carving's cross-section acts like a fingerprint for the tool that made it. The older, U-shaped channels, consistent with being pecked out with a stone tool, can be clearly distinguished from any later V-shaped grooves that might have been made with a metal implement. This allows for a much more nuanced understanding of the rock's timeline, helping to separate the truly ancient work from potential later additions. Furthermore, the technology serves a vital preservation role. The Judaculla Rock is slowly but surely succumbing to the elements. Every rainstorm and freeze-thaw cycle subtly erodes its surface. The high-resolution scan now acts as a permanent, perfect digital archive, preserving the exact state of the carvings at this moment in time for all future generations, ensuring that even if the physical rock degrades, its incredible story will never be lost. Unfortunately, the soft soapstone that has preserved these ancient messages for millennia also makes them tragically vulnerable to a modern threat: the carelessness and disrespect of visitors. For over a century, the Judaculla Rock has been caught in a painful battle between those who seek to protect it and those who unknowingly, or sometimes intentionally, contribute to its slow destruction. The very quality that made it an ideal canvas for ancient artists, its relative softness, means it is easily scarred by the scrape of a coin, the edge of a keys, or the sole of a hiking boot. Each act of touching, each attempt to make a rubbing, and every piece of modern graffiti steadily erases the very history people come to see, wearing down the precise edges of grooves that have survived for thousands of years. This damage is not a new phenomenon. Even in the late 1800s, as the rock became a known local curiosity, visitors felt compelled to leave their own mark alongside the ancient ones. Early photographs and sketches reveal that the initials WH and the date 1858 were already carved deeply into the surface, a stark and permanent declaration of 19th century vandalism imposed upon a sacred indigenous site. This impulse to carve one's initials to say, "I was here," creates a heartbreaking palimpsest where the arrogant mark of a moment obscures a symbol that held profound meaning for an entire culture. This initial act set a terrible precedent, and throughout the 20th century, the rock became a target for more graffiti, with people adding their names, dates, and even crude drawings, heedlessly treating a priceless archaeological treasure like a common picnic table. The rise in tourism brought a new kind of threat: unintentional damage born from sheer curiosity. As more people visited, walking on the rock became commonplace. The accumulated grit on the soles of shoes acted like sandpaper, gradually polishing away the delicate patina that protects the stone and softening the sharp edges of the carvings. Well-meaning researchers in the past sometimes used destructive methods like making plaster casts, which could pull away fragile fragments of the rock face. Others poured liquids or used powders to highlight the carvings for photographs, potentially introducing chemicals that could accelerate erosion. Every footstep, every touch, however gentle, contributes to an incremental loss that, over decades, has had a cumulative and devastating effect. In response to this escalating damage, a powerful coalition of preservationists has emerged, led by the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in partnership with Jackson County and the state of North Carolina. Their first major act of protection was the construction of a large, open-air shelter over the rock. This sturdy roof shields the soapstone from the direct impact of rain and sun, mitigating the natural weathering that, while slow, was nevertheless taking its toll. Perhaps more importantly, they installed a sturdy wooden viewing platform that encircles the rock. This simple but brilliant design allows visitors to get a close, unobstructed view of every part of the carving without ever needing to step onto the stone itself. It creates a necessary physical and psychological barrier, signaling that this is not a place to walk but a sanctuary to be respected from a distance. The Cherokee tribe has also taken a leading role in reshaping the narrative around the site through education and cultural reclamation. Tribal historians and cultural experts are now central to interpreting the rock for the public. The informational signs at the site no longer focus on fantastical theories about Vikings or lost tribes. They tell the story of Tsul Kalu from the Cherokee perspective, finally giving voice to the people for whom this place has always been sacred. This shift is a critical form of preservation in itself. When visitors understand they are standing at a site equivalent to a cathedral rather than a mere tourist oddity, they are far more likely to treat it with the reverence it deserves. The message is clear: this is not a rock to be carved upon, but a church to be honored. Modern technology has become one of the greatest allies in this preservation fight. In a landmark project, archaeologists used high-resolution three-dimensional laser scanning to create a perfect digital twin of the entire rock surface. This incredible archive captures every groove, cupule, and even the scars of vandalism in minute detail, preserving the rock's current state for all time. Should any further damage occur or as natural erosion continues, this digital record will remain pristine, allowing future generations to study the carvings long after the originals may have faded. This technological intervention represents a new chapter in preservation, moving beyond simply protecting the physical object to eternally safeguarding the information it contains. The battle for Judaculla Rock is a continuous effort, a quiet vigilance against the slow creep of time and the carelessness of humanity, all to ensure that the giant story is never silenced. When we step back and place the Cherokee legend of Tsul Kalu within the grand tapestry of world mythology, a fascinating pattern emerges, revealing that the impulse to personify the awesome and terrifying power of nature into the form of giants is a truly universal human phenomenon. The slant-eyed giant of the Blue Ridge Mountains begins to feel less like an isolated folk tale and more like a vital North American chapter in a story told across the globe. Consider the Jötun of Norse mythology, colossal, elemental beings who dwelled in the harsh, frozen wastes of Jotunheimr. Like Judaculla, who was both benefactor and punisher of hunters, the Jötun were not simply evil. They were a fundamental part of the cosmic order, representing the chaotic, untamable forces of nature that the gods themselves had to contend with. A figure like Skadi, the giantess goddess of winter, hunting, and mountains, shares a striking thematic kinship with Judaculla. Both are sovereigns of the wilderness, masters of the hunt, and deities whose favor must be earned through respect and correct ritual. This pattern repeats itself in the misty legends of the Celtic world with the Fomorians, a race of monstrous, misshapen giants who inhabited Ireland before the arrival of its more famous gods, the Tuatha Danann. Often depicted with a single arm, a single leg, or animal features, the Fomorians, much like Judaculla with his distinctive slanted eyes, were physically other. They represented the dark, chaotic, and primordial forces of the land, the dangerous and unpredictable aspects of nature that the new gods had to overcome to establish order. Yet, even they were integrated into the mythology. The great King Brez was half Fomorian, showing that the line between the civilized world and the wild, giant-ruled one was often blurred, a complexity that echoes the Cherokee relationship with their own powerful, ambiguous guardian. Perhaps the most iconic parallel lies in the Greek Titans, the primordial deities of immense size and strength who were the pre-Olympian rulers of the cosmos. They were the personifications of foundational natural forces. Oceanus was the sea, Hyperion the sun, and Gaia the very earth itself. Their conflict with the Olympians, the Titanomachy, symbolizes the struggle to bring order to chaos, to establish a new regime over the old, wild world. While Judaculla is not challenged in the same way, he embodies a similar concept. He is the ancient pre-human power of the Appalachian wilderness, a permanent, sovereign force that humanity must acknowledge and appease rather than conquer. The Judaculla Rock, then, becomes his Olympus, a permanent, physical monument to his enduring power, much like how the Greeks believed Mount Olympus was the home of their gods. This global fascination with giants and their connection to stone is perhaps the most compelling thread. From the Cherokee giant's footprint to the Celtic legends of giants building stone circles like Stonehenge, to the Greek myth of the Cyclopes constructing the massive, Cyclopean walls of Mycenae, cultures worldwide have used the figure of the giant to explain the existence of ancient, monumental stonework that seemed too grand to be the work of ordinary humans. These stories are more than just fanciful etiologies, they are a profound form of respect. They represent an ancient acknowledgement that the landscapes our ancestors inherited, with their massive boulders, mysterious stone arrangements, and dramatic mountain peaks, felt shaped by hands far larger and more powerful than their own. The giant becomes the original architect, the first mover of stones, a narrative that honors the grandeur of the natural world by giving it a face and a name. In this light, the Judaculla Rock is not an outlier but a central and powerful testament to a shared human instinct to find narrative and meaning in the most enduring features of our world, linking the mountains of North Carolina to the mythological landscapes of the entire ancient world. Despite the laser scans, the tribal wisdom, and centuries of scholarly debate, the Judaculla Rock remains, in its heart, an enigma. We can analyze its grooves, date the surrounding artifacts, and compare its symbols to others across the globe, but we are ultimately left standing before a locked door, peering through a keyhole at a world we can never fully enter. The most profound, unanswered question is not about the specific meaning of a single circle, but the rock's fundamental raison d'etre. Was it a single, unified creation with one purpose, or a communal ledger added to over countless generations, its function evolving with the centuries? We see a compelling map of rivers and hunting grounds, a persuasive astronomical chart, and a powerful record of shamanic vision. The frustrating and beautiful truth is that it could convincingly be all three at once, a multi-layered document where a single line might simultaneously mark a territorial boundary, a solstice sunrise alignment, and the path of a spirit journey. This complexity defies our modern need for categorical answers, reminding us that for its creators, the spiritual and the practical were not separate realms but a single, intertwined reality. This leads directly to the second great mystery, the language of the symbols themselves. We might confidently identify a turkey track or a human figure, but what is the grammar that connects them? What story is being told by the specific arrangement of a concentric circle next to a set of radiating lines adjacent to a series of cupules, without a living key, a Rosetta Stone that translates this iconography into a narrative we can understand? Each interpretation remains an educated guess. We are essentially trying to read a complex sentence where we recognize the letters but not the words, grasping at individual nouns without understanding the verbs that give them action and meaning. The possibility that different clusters of symbols were carved centuries apart by different cultural groups only deepens the obscurity, suggesting the rock may hold not one story but many, a layered palimpsest of meanings that have fused into a single, incomprehensible whole over time. And this brings us to the most humbling limitation of all, the chasm of time and consciousness that separates us from the minds of the artists. We can study their tools, their environment, and their descendants' oral traditions, but we can never truly know the thoughts that flashed behind the eyes of the individual who first struck that quartz hammerstone against the soapstone, initiating a project that would span generations. What specific emotion drove that first act? Was it fear, reverence, a need for control in an unpredictable world, or an overwhelming sense of wonder at the cosmos? We can infer their beliefs, but we cannot access their interior world, their personal relationship with Tsul Kalu, or the exact nature of the visions that may have inspired those swirling, intricate patterns. The rock is a permanent record of their actions, but the intentions, the fleeting prayers, the specific instructions passed from elder to apprentice, those whispers on the wind have been lost forever. This admission of uncertainty is not a failure of research. It is, in fact, the source of the rock's enduring power. The unanswered questions are what keep us returning, what fuel both scientific inquiry and personal wonder. They transform the site from a solved archaeological puzzle into a living monument to human curiosity itself. The mystery invites participation, urging each new generation to look at the symbols afresh, to bring new perspectives and technologies to bear, and to simply sit in quiet contemplation, feeling the weight of the unknown. Perhaps the true purpose of the Judaculla Rock was not to provide answers for us, but to forever ask a question, a permanent stone-carved invitation to remember how much we do not know, and to marvel at the vast and silent histories that surround us, written not in books, but in the very landscape we walk upon. While the scientific and historical debates continue, a visit to the Judaculla Rock today is often about more than just archaeology. For many, it becomes a deeply personal and sometimes unsettling experience. Modern visitors frequently arrive with cameras and guidebooks, but they leave with stories that are far harder to document. Despite the protective shelter and the viewing platform that creates a sense of a managed historical site, an undeniable atmosphere of otherness persists. The air itself often feels different here, thicker, quieter, as if the mountain mist is holding its breath. It's a silence that isn't empty but feels observant. Countless individuals have reported a sudden, inexplicable feeling of being watched, a prickling on the back of the neck that has them turning to look over their shoulder into the seemingly empty forest. This isn't the simple unease of being alone in the woods. It's a specific, focused sensation that something ancient and aware is present, a silent witness to their intrusion. These eerie feelings often extend beyond simple intuition into the realm of the physical. In an age where we are constantly connected, the site seems to have a peculiar relationship with modern technology. Visitors and researchers alike have recounted frustrating and inexplicable malfunctions. Digital cameras and smartphones, which function perfectly everywhere else, suddenly refuse to focus on the carvings, producing only blurry, distorted images despite numerous attempts. Batteries can drain at an alarming rate, or devices may simply shut off without warning and refuse to power back on until they are moved a significant distance away from the rock. These are not isolated incidents, but a common thread in the visitor logs and online forums dedicated to the site. It's as if the very energy of the place rejects the cold logic of modern electronics, insisting that its secrets are not to be captured and digitized, but to be felt and respected on its own terms. The most compelling accounts come from those who visit at dawn or dusk, when the long shadows stretch and the line between the present and the past feels most thin. Some speak of hearing faint, unintelligible whispers just at the edge of hearing, a murmur that seems to come from the stone itself or the surrounding trees. Others describe catching fleeting movements in their peripheral vision, a dark shape shifting between the trunks, a flicker that is gone the moment they turn their head to look. A few have even reported a sudden, overwhelming emotional shift, such as an intense and sorrowful feeling of loss or a powerful, primal surge of fear that has them hurrying back to their cars, unable to explain the urgency of their departure. These experiences are almost universally described as deeply personal and subjective, yet their common themes are too striking to dismiss as mere coincidence. Skeptics, of course, offer rational explanations. They suggest that the feeling of being watched could be a psychological response to the site's known sacredness and isolation, a form of heightened awareness or suggestibility. The technical glitches could be attributed to the mineral composition of the soapstone or the local geomagnetic fields interfering with delicate electronics. The whispers could be the wind channeling through the nearby valley, and the peripheral shadows could simply be deer or other wildlife moving through the dense forest. These are all perfectly plausible theories, and yet for those who have stood there and felt the palpable weight of presence, the logical explanations often feel insufficient. They touch the rock not with a tool but with their hand and feel something that transcends data, a resonance, a vibration of age and power that bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to something much older within us. Whether these encounters are the product of a suggestible mind, unexplained natural phenomena, or something truly mystical, they have become an inseparable part of the Judaculla Rock story. These personal anecdotes add a rich human layer of supernatural intrigue to the archaeological puzzle. They remind us that some places on this earth hold a power that is not easily quantified or explained, a presence that is felt in the spine long before it is understood by the brain. The rock does not give up its secrets easily, guarding them not just with weathered stone and enigmatic symbols, but with an atmosphere that challenges the very way we perceive reality, inviting us to consider that the giant's realm might not be as abandoned as it appears. So where does this journey leave us? After exploring the Cherokee legends of Tsul Kalu, the striking parallels with medieval European symbolism, the intricate theories of astronomical maps and shamanic vision quests, and even the far-flung notion of pre-Columbian voyagers, we find that the Judaculla Rock refuses to be confined to a single, simple explanation. It is not an either-or mystery, but a breathtaking and profound all-of-the-above enigma. This sprawling soapstone canvas emerges not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a permanent question mark carved into the very heart of the Appalachian Mountains, a testament to the vast and intricate spiritual and practical lives of the people who called this land home for millennia. It stands at a fascinating crossroads, bridging the deep, animistic wisdom of ancient Native American traditions with the universal human curiosities that also fueled the mystical and exploratory spirit of medieval Europe, a shared desire to map the cosmos, commune with the divine, and leave a permanent mark of our understanding upon the world. The true cultural significance of the Judaculla Rock lies in this very multiplicity. It is a sacred Cherokee sanctuary, a historical archive of the hunt, a potential celestial calendar, and a monument to the power of the giant Judaculla all at once. To try and reduce it to just one of these things is to miss the point entirely. Its power and its mystery stem from its layers, each generation potentially adding its own chapter to an ongoing story written in stone. This is what makes it such a priceless treasure, not just for North Carolina or for the Cherokee people, but for all of humanity. It is a rare and powerful reminder that our ancestors, no matter where they were in the world, were deep thinkers, keen observers, and spiritual beings who sought to understand their place in a vast and often mysterious universe. This is why the call for respect and preservation is so vital. When we visit such a site, we are not walking on a mere rock. We are stepping into a living church, a library of stone, and a direct portal to the past. The feelings of awe, the eerie sensations, the technological glitches, all of it invites us to approach not just with curiosity, but with humility. We are guests in Judaculla's realm, and our first duty is to listen, to observe, and to ensure that this incredible monument survives for countless generations to come, so that others may stand where we stand and feel the same stirring of wonder. The rock does not ask us to believe any one theory, but it does demand our reverence for the mystery itself. In the end, the greatest gift of the Judaculla Rock may be the way it re-enchants the world around us. In our modern age of satellites and answers at our fingertips, it reminds us that some mysteries are meant to endure, that some questions are more valuable than their solutions. It encourages us to look at our own landscapes with new eyes, to wonder about the stories buried in the stones and the rivers and the ancient trees in our own communities. So the next time you find yourself in a quiet, wild place, pause for a moment, listen to the wind in the trees, feel the age of the land beneath your feet, and let your imagination wander. You might just feel the presence of the giants that still walk there, guardians of mysteries we have only just begun to perceive.